I'm drinking Russian caravan tea today. Traditionally, the smoky character was considered to have been imparted to the tea by the close proximity of the camel caravans to countless campfires en route across the Mongolian steppes from China to Russia. Last week on Tea and Tarot, I was finding my feet. I hope you enjoy the show. My friend Darren said, very informative, a little bit spooky, and a really lovely style of delivery. Already booked my front row seat for the second episode. So I hope it wasn't spooky in a bad way. I shall just carry on as I am. I will neither attempt to be more spooky or less spooky because I'm not quite sure whether that's an asset or a liability. Last episode I recommended a tarot pack, here the Rider-Waite pack, and I recommended a reference book for you, The Tarot by Alfred Douglas, and we did a little reading. This time I'm going to tell you, well, we're going to do three things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where the tarot comes from, or may come from. Then I'm going to introduce you to 4 cards from the deck, the 4 aces. Then after that I'll do a little reading, just so that you can see how everything falls into place. So, this is a rather mysterious deck of cards, isn't it? I think a lot of people would be asking where on earth it comes from. People think it was invented maybe in the north of Italy, maybe in the 12th or 13th centuries. And the interesting thing about that is that the north of Italy, because of Venice, was really the crossroads of the world in those days. They were having trade with China, with the Middle East, with the whole of the Christian empire, and then the northern countries as well, and Britain and the Celtic nations. So when we look at the tarot pack, we see influences from all these different churches and civilizations and religions and philosophies. For example, look, the Hanged Man. That seems to be clearly a piece of Norse imagery or Celtic imagery. The Magician could be an Egyptian image there. The Hierophant, sometimes called the Pope, well, that seems very much Christian, doesn't it? The Chariot? Maybe a bit of Roman stuff in there? The High Priestess? That sounds a bit Middle Eastern to me. Something from Turkey or something like that. For me, what's important is that this is some kind of synthesis of a lot of different ideas and philosophies that were flying around at that time. It seems to have been put together by people who were very open, very inquiring. They weren't satisfied with any one of the many creeds that were going around at that time. They were looking for a way of drawing everything together into their own system. That means that they were outside of these big monolithic philosophies and religions that were being formed. And I think that's what makes the tarot attractive to me, that it's it's a system of thought for people who like to go their own way. What's really surprising is that the tarot is still attacked by various people. Only on Twitter the other day I saw someone very cross with the tarot, saying that all tarot readers would go straight to hell. Well, let's not get too into the negativity of that, but it just does show how the tarot is based in a feeling of dissent and heresy, and that happens to be the sort of thing I like. There are a lot of cards in the tarot, and if we don't start looking at them and going through them one by one, we'll never get to the end. So I thought today we would start with the 4 aces. There's the Ace of Pentacles or coins, the Ace of Cups, the Ace of Wands or batons, and the Ace of Swords. What we're doing here now is we are combining an element with a number. Swords are air. Batons are fire. Cups are water. And coins are earth. And what does one mean? Well, one is clearly a beginning. And what is a beginning? Is it a foundation? Is it a spark? Is it a source? Is it an ultimate in some way? Okay. Well, I think this is how these elements combine with this number. The Ace of Pentacles, the element of earth combined with the number 1. This gives a value of foundation. This is the ground under your feet. This is where you're standing. This is where you put down your roots. And this is where you find your feeling of security, or, as I was saying last time, sanity. The Ace of Cups, water, and number 1. This for me is a source, a wellspring. It's a very positive card. All the aces are positive. It's a wellspring of joy. It's a feeling of connecting with that wonderful, basic joy. When you're joyful, you know you're joyful, and you know that things are right. You know that this is a good feeling. You know that that's how things should be. So it's a kind of foundation, isn't it? It's a kind of ultimate. The Ace of Wands, fire, the number 1. Very much a starting point, I think, this one. Fire could be the creative force. It could be the spark. I see the Ace of Batons as the urge to create, the urge to make, the urge to get going, maybe even the urge to get out of bed. Batons are a dynamic suit. They are a suit of energy. I think the Ace of Batons is a bit phallic, if I may say so. I wish it wasn't, but it is. The Ace of Swords, element of air, combined with the number 1. Well, swords and air, that's just thought, ideas. So the Ace of Swords is a kind of ultimate, and I think in the realm of thought, you could say that the ultimate is truth. For me, the Ace of Swords is truth. All the aces have a feeling of a divine seal of approval, a divine endorsement when they appear in a reading. It's always fortunate when you get an ace. The Ace of Swords in particular has this feeling of God's stamp of approval. The feeling when the Ace of Swords appears is that, yes, this is true, this is right, this is just. There's a feeling of rightness, even justice about this card. Okay, swig of tea. How about a reading? Let's see if we can put some of these ideas together. Last time I just put 3 cards down in a very straight line across the table. This time I'm going to use a 7-card reading because I'm going to ask the tarot to tell me about a specific project of mine. The different readings are different grids that you can put the tarot cards onto. Let me tell you about the 7-card reading. It's in the shape of a horseshoe. The first card refers to past circumstances. The second card refers to present ones, and the third card to future ones. Skipping across to the 5th card. The 5th card refers to your environment. The 6th card refers to the obstacles around you, in between you and where you're trying to get to. The 7th card tells you where you're likely to end up in this matter if you carry on the course you're on. That doesn't necessarily mean where you want to end up, but it's where you're headed. And in the middle of the horseshoe is the fourth card, and that's the card of advice. Now I'm going to ask the tarot to give me a reading and some advice about a little project that just popped up in my mind recently, and actually it popped up in the mind of a colleague of mine, a woman who shares our studio, and she suggested that maybe I could write a cookbook about my fermentation expertise, and she might illustrate it, which is a marvellous idea because she's a marvellous illustrator. So I thought, without getting too heavily into it, this is a very new idea, I haven't invested very much time or energy in it yet, I thought I'd just throw a few cards down and get a feeling for where I'm at with regard to this idea. So what I'm going to do now is, as I suggested last week, I'm going to ground myself a bit. I'm going to connect myself a bit. Then I'm going to hold in my mind this question. And the question is, please give me a 7-card reading on the matter of this idea I've had to write a book about fermentation recipes. Holding the idea in my mind, I shuffle the cards. Nothing mysterious about that. I cut the cards, and then I deal 7. Okay, so I've had a look at the cards, and once again, ladies and gentlemen, I have to report that so often when one reads tarot cards, especially when one reads them for oneself, at least, okay, when I read tarot cards, especially when I read them for myself, my first reaction is, that's not quite what I wanted. But then if it was what I wanted, what would be the point of reading tarot cards? This, I think, is a dialogue between you and, who knows, your intuition. The first thing I notice when I scan through these 7 cards is that the 7th card is the 3 of Swords, ladies and gentlemen, which is not a card we want at all. It's the card of grief. Something will happen that you don't want to happen. It'll go wrong somehow. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to die. It's an energy. It's a word in our vocabulary. Nevertheless, we have a 7-card reading here. We must respect what the tarot has given us, and we must apply these 7 cards to their positions on the grid. Okay, so let's start with number 1. The King of Wands. That's in the past circumstances position. I used to think, who cares about the past? Tell me about the future. But the past is important because when the tarot card gives us a card in the past, what it's saying is this card in the past has a bearing on what you are doing now and the direction you're going in. And this card for me immediately suggests one of the people who inspired me to get serious about the business of food fermentation, an alternative doctor I was seeing at the time, who suggested that I get into fermentation to heal my stomach. Card number 2, present circumstances, 7 of batons, the card of valour or courage. I'm being courageous here, aren't I? I'm throwing myself into a new project. I'm telling myself, I can do this. I can make a success of it. I'm really investing a lot of belief and energy and spirit in it. And I'm getting quite caught up in the whole excitement of a new thing. Fair enough. Let's see what comes next. The Knight of Swords. Now, court cards can be people in our lives or they can be energies. I'm not sure who that is as a person. It's in the future. It's a bit mysterious. I do know that the Knight of Swords is very impetuous, tends to rush around doing things very quickly, often gets things right, but sometimes could cause dissent, could cause disturbance. I'm going to skip the fourth card and go to the fifth card, the environment. The Six of Cups is the card of harvest, the fruits of the labours that one has done in the past. It's the rewards of past efforts. It's the past coming into the present and supporting one. In this situation, the card is reversed. What does that mean? Something a bit blocked or problematic about that energy. Feels like this accessing of the work that one has done in the past is not happening quite smoothly. Okay, we'll bear that in mind. Sixth card. This is the obstacle position. The Eight of Coins. Now, the Eight of Coins is the card of someone who's working hard, who's putting a lot of effort into their job, into their work. Now, at the best of times, the implication of the Eight of Coins is that one may be becoming a bit workaholic here. And I think in this position in the spread, it's in the sixth position, which is the position of obstacles. That's quite clear. Too much work, too much throwing oneself into this project might be an obstacle. And as I've said, in the seventh card, we have grief. If I carry on exactly along the path I'm on, I will come to grief. It won't be quite right. What are we getting from all this? It feels that I'm being very enthusiastic and I'm working hard, but maybe I'm going a bit too fast, so that what I've learned in the past, what I've thought about, all the recipes that I've read, all the food preparation that I've done, all this knowledge that I've had, I'm not really allowing it to bubble up because I'm working so hard. What's the advice card? The fourth card in the spread. Temperance. Now, actually, temperance is one of the cards in the tarot pack that does exactly what it says on the tin. It advises temperance. It advises the skillful mixing of various different factors in the situation. Imagine there's two liquids and you're skillfully mixing them. You might even be cooking. I think for me what this means is slow down. Be temperate in your enthusiasm. Just allow yourself to be enthusiastic at the same time as relaxing, so that this project, which after all doesn't have a deadline, can just happen in its own time, so that the fun and the inspiration of it can bubble up in their own way, like a pot of sauerkraut, ladies and gentlemen. It's also interesting and a good idea, I think, to be clear or to be honest about cards that you don't entirely understand, cards that you can't quite fit into your scheme of things. If I look at this reading, all the cards are fairly clear except for the third one, the Knight of Swords, and I rather glibly took this to mean a kind of over-enthusiasm, a tendency to move too quickly. But this could also be a person. This could be someone I haven't met. So what one can do in these circumstances is to put the cards away and maybe note down what they were in your notebook. And remember, if there was a card that you didn't entirely understand, you could put a little question mark by it and then as you carry on with your life and as the project develops, you might remember, there was a rather mysterious Knight of Swords in that reading, wasn't there? I wonder, is that person the Knight of Swords? Anyway, that was the second edition of Tea and Tarot. I shall finish the last drops of Russian caravan tea and look forward to seeing you next time. Next time I will release a video on or around June the 1st, and I'm going to try an experiment. I'm going to do a reading in which I will do my best to have some intuitive feelings about the month ahead. I will also carry on talking about the tarot pack and how to read them. So if you enjoyed this, and if you'd like this to carry on, if you'd like me to make more of these, then it would be great if you could like the video, maybe leave a comment. You could ask me a question, you could even suggest a reading, or share my YouTube channel with a friend, or maybe even subscribe. That was me, Robert in Neukölln, your friendly tarot expert, signing off and wishing you a good 2 weeks. Bye.